The diplomatic arrangement. Ambassador Zara Xinfel stood motionless before the grand window of her private chambers, her iridescent scales shimmering in the soft light of Nexus Prime's twin moons. The sprawling cityscape of the galactic capital stretched out before her, a testament to the unity and cooperation of countless alien species. Yet today, that unity felt more fragile than ever. Zara's slender fingers absently traced the intricate patterns on her ceremonial robes as her mind raced. The Galactic Council's latest decree echoed in her thoughts, a desperate measure to prevent an impending war with the newly discovered human race, an arranged diplomatic union between a high-ranking Arcturian and a human representative. And she, Zara Xinfel, had been chosen as the Arcturian half of this union. The Arcturians were known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom, empathy, and commitment to peace. Their telepathic abilities and highly advanced technology had made them natural mediators in galactic affairs. But the humans, Zara shuddered at the thought. Reports of the human race had sent shockwaves through the galactic community, a species that had clawed its way to the stars through sheer determination and violence, overcoming natural disasters and their own internal conflicts with a ferocity that both impressed and terrified other races. They were unpredictable, emotional, and above all, dangerous. Ambassador. The soft chime of her assistant's voice broke through Zara's reverie. The council is requesting your presence. Zara took a deep breath, centering herself as she had been trained to do since childhood. Thank you, Lyra. I'll be there shortly. As she made her way through the gleaming corridors of the Nexus Prime diplomatic quarter, Zara couldn't help but notice the worried glances and hushed whispers that followed her. News of her impending union had spread quickly, and she could sense the mixture of pity and concern emanating from her fellow diplomats. The council chambers were a cacophony of voices and emotions as Zara entered. Representatives from dozens of species argued passionately, their translators struggling to keep up with the rapid-fire debates. At the center of it all stood High Counselor Vexera, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly as he attempted to maintain order. Silence. Vexera's amplified voice boomed through the chamber. Ambassador Xinfel has arrived. We will now proceed with the formal announcement. As Zara took her place at the podium, she felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. She straightened her posture, projecting an aura of calm she didn't truly feel. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. I stand before you today to accept the great responsibility that has been placed upon me. In the interest of galactic peace and understanding, I will enter into a diplomatic union with a representative of the human race. A murmur rippled through the assembled diplomats. Zara continued, I know there are many who fear the humans and what their inclusion in our galactic community might mean. But I believe that through patience, empathy, and open communication, we can forge a path forward together. As she spoke, Zara caught sight of a small delegation seated near the back of the chamber. Their appearance was strikingly different from the varied alien forms she was accustomed to. Bipedal, with smooth skin and hair atop their heads. Humans. And at their center, a tall figure with piercing eyes that seemed to look right through her. This must be him, Zara realized. Her future mate. The human stood, and the chamber fell silent. I am Captain Marcus Chen of Earth, he announced, his voice carrying a strength that sent an involuntary shiver down Zora's spine. On behalf of humanity, I accept this union and the responsibility it entails. Their eyes met across the chamber, and Zara felt a jolt of something. Fear, curiosity, she couldn't be sure. But as she studied the human's face, she saw none of the savagery she had expected. Instead, there was determination, intelligence, and perhaps a hint of the same apprehension she felt. As the council session concluded and the diplomats filed out, Zara found herself face to face with Captain Chen. Up close, he was even more imposing. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a physicality that spoke of barely contained power. Ambassador Xinfel, he said, inclining his head in what she assumed was a gesture of respect. I look forward to working together for the betterment of both our peoples." Zara hesitated for a moment before responding. "As do I, Captain Chen. Though I must admit, there is much about humans that we do not understand." A small smile played at the corners of Chen's mouth. "The feeling is mutual, Ambassador. But that's why we're here, isn't it? To bridge that gap of understanding." As they parted ways, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that she had grossly underestimated the complexity of humans. Captain Chen was not the mindless brute she had feared, but neither was he entirely what he seemed. There were depths to him, to his entire species, that she had yet to fathom. Back in her chambers, Zara gazed out at the stars, her mind whirling with possibilities. The path ahead would be challenging, filled with cultural misunderstandings and potential pitfalls. But for the first time since hearing of her assignment, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, this union could be more than a political maneuver. It could be the first step towards a true understanding between their peoples. As Nexus Prime's night cycle began, casting the city in a soft purple glow, Zara made a silent vow. She would approach this union with an open mind and an open heart, no matter how difficult it might be. For the sake of galactic peace, and for the sake of her own growth, she would strive to see beyond her preconceptions and truly know the human called Marcus Chen. Little did she know that this decision would set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about humans, about her own people, and about herself. First impressions. The days following the Council's announcement passed in a whirlwind of preparations and briefings. Zara found herself inundated with cultural data on humans, much of it contradictory, and all of it overwhelming. Humans were capable of great violence, yet also of profound compassion. They were logical and emotional, often in the same breath. Their history was a tapestry of conflicts and alliances, of destruction and creation. As she sat in her study, surrounded by holographic displays of human art, literature, and historical records, Zara felt a growing sense of unease. How could she possibly hope to understand such a complex species, let alone form a meaningful union with one of them? A chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Ambassador," Lara's voice came through the comm. "Captain Chen has arrived for your scheduled meeting." Zara took a deep breath, centering herself. "Send him in, please." The door slid open, and Marcus Chen stepped into the room. He was dressed in what Zara assumed was formal human attire. A crisp uniform adorned with symbols she didn't recognize. His posture was rigid, almost military, but his eyes held a warmth that caught her off guard. "Ambassador Xinful," he said, bowing slightly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me privately." Zara gestured to a seating area designed to accommodate various alien physiologies. "Please, make yourself comfortable, Captain. And you may call me Zara." As they settled into their seats, an awkward silence fell between them. Zara found herself studying Marcus's features, so alien yet oddly fascinating. The varied colors in his irises, the subtle expressions that flitted across his face. Each detail hinted at a depth of emotion she hadn't expected. Marcus cleared his throat. "I thought it might be helpful if we spoke candidly, away from the political theater of the council chambers. There's so much misunderstanding between our peoples, and I believe it starts with us." Zara nodded, her antenna twitching slightly in agreement. "A wise suggestion. Though I must admit, Captain, much of what I've learned about humans has been unsettling." A rueful smile crossed Marcus's face. "I can only imagine. Let me guess. Tales of our wars, our environmental mistakes, our capacity for cruelty." "Yes," Zora admitted, "but also stories of great achievements, of overcoming impossible odds. Your species is a paradox, Captain Chen." "Marcus, please," he said, "and you're not wrong. We are a paradox. But I'd argue that's true of all sentient species to some degree. We simply wear our contradictions more openly than most." As they talked, Zara found herself gradually relaxing. Marcus was articulate and thoughtful, eager to learn about Arcturian culture even as he explained human concepts. He spoke of Earth's troubled history with a mix of regret and pride, acknowledging past mistakes while emphasizing humanity's capacity for growth. Our drive to explore, to push boundaries, it's led us to make terrible errors, Marcus explained. But it's also what brought us to the stars. We're not perfect, far from it. But we're always striving to be better. Zara leaned forward, intrigued. That drive, that constant push for improvement, it's admirable, but doesn't it exhaust you? Arcturians believe in the power of reflection, of finding balance and harmony with the universe. Marcus considered this for a moment. I can see the value in that. But for humans, I think the struggle itself is often where we find meaning. It's in facing challenges that we discover what we're truly capable of. As their conversation deepened, touching on philosophy, art, and personal experiences, Zara found her preconceptions slowly crumbling. This human was not the brutish warrior she had feared, nor was he a simple diplomat mouthing platitudes. Marcus Chen was complex, thoughtful, and surprisingly vulnerable. At one point, discussing the pressures of their respective roles, Marcus's composure slipped slightly. I won't lie, Zara. This whole situation terrifies me. The fate of human galactic relations resting on our shoulders. It's a weight I'm not sure I'm ready to bear. The admission startled Zara. In her culture, such open display of doubt would be seen as a weakness, but coming from Marcus, it felt refreshingly honest. Without thinking, she reached out, her slender fingers brushing against his hand. You're not alone in that fear, Marcus, she said softly. But perhaps that shared uncertainty can be a foundation for understanding. The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then, with a small cough, Marcus pulled back slightly. I brought something for you, he said, reaching into a pocket. A human custom when meeting someone important. He produced a small object, offering it to Zara. It was a crystal, but unlike any she had seen before. As she held it up, light refracted through its facets, creating a mesmerizing display of colors. It's called opal, Marcus explained, formed over millions of years from silica deposits. I thought, well, it reminded me of your scales. Zara was touched by the gesture and by the thought behind it. It's beautiful, she said, genuinely moved. Thank you, Marcus. As their meeting drew to a close, Zara found herself reluctant to see Marcus leave. The human had surprised her at every turn, challenging her assumptions and offering glimpses of a depth she hadn't expected. I look forward to our next meeting, she said as they stood. There is still much to discuss. Marcus nodded, a warm smile lighting up his features. Likewise, Zara. I think we've made a good start here. As the door closed behind him, Zara returned to her desk, the opal crystal cool against her palm. She stared at the human cultural files spread before her, seeing them now in a new light. There was still so much to learn, so many potential misunderstandings to navigate. But for the first time since this arrangement began, Zara felt a spark of genuine excitement. This union, she realized, could be more than a diplomatic necessity. It could be an opportunity for true growth for both their species, and perhaps in coming to understand Marcus Chen, she might come to better understand herself. With renewed purpose, Zara began making notes, planning for their next encounter. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with potential pitfalls. But now, at least she felt she had a worthy partner with whom to walk it. Cultural exchange. The following weeks saw Zara and Marcus spending increasing amounts of time together, their meetings evolving from formal diplomatic sessions to more casual encounters. Today, they stood in one of Nexus Prime's holographic chambers, surrounded by a perfect recreation of an earth forest. Zara marveled at the lush greenery, so different from the crystalline structures of her homeworld. She reached out to touch a leaf, surprised by its soft texture. It's extraordinary, she breathed. Your world is so alive. Marcus smiled, clearly pleased by her reaction. Wait until you see this, he said, tapping a control on his wrist device. The scene shifted, the forest transforming into a bustling city street. Hovercars zipped overhead, while humans of all shapes and sizes hurried along the sidewalks. New York City, Marcus explained, one of our oldest and most diverse metropolises. Zara's antenna twitched as she tried to process the cacophony of sights and sounds. It's chaotic, she said, a note of anxiety in her voice. How do your people find peace in such an environment? Marcus chuckled. It's not for everyone, he admitted. But many humans thrive on this energy. The constant motion, the endless possibilities. It drives us forward. As they explored more of Earth's varied landscapes and cultures, Zara began to understand the source of humanity's restless spirit. Their planet was a study in contrasts. Deserts and ice fields, mountains and oceans, teeming jungles and stark tundras. It was little wonder that humans had developed such adaptability. Your turn, Marcus said as they exited the holographic chamber. Show me your world. Zara hesitated for a moment before leading him to her private quarters. There, she activated a personal holoprojector, filling the room with images of Arcturia. Crystalline spires reached towards the sky, their facets refracting the light of 3 suns. Arcturians moved gracefully through the scene, their iridescent scales shimmering. It's beautiful, Marcus said softly. So orderly, so serene. Zara nodded, a hint of pride in her voice. We believe in harmony above all else. Every structure, every action, is designed to maintain the balance of our society and our ecosystem. As she guided Marcus through a tour of her homeworld, Zara found herself seeing it through new eyes. The rigid symmetry of Arcturian cities, once a source of comfort, now seemed almost sterile compared to the vibrant chaos of Earth. Don't you ever feel constrained? Marcus asked, his brow furrowed as he studied a holo image of an Arcturian learning center. The question caught Zara off guard. Constrained? I've never thought of it that way, she admitted. Our way of life provides stability, security. It allows us to focus on higher pursuits, art, philosophy, scientific advancement. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I can see the appeal. But doesn't it also limit potential? On Earth, some of our greatest innovations have come from those who challenged the established order. The conversation continued long into the night, each of them challenging the other's assumptions about what constituted an ideal society. Zara found herself both frustrated and exhilarated by Marcus's persistent questioning. He forced her to examine beliefs she had long taken for granted. As the days passed, their cultural exchange deepened. Zara introduced Marcus to Arcturian cuisine, delicate crystals that dissolved on the tongue, releasing complex flavors and nutrient bursts. In return, Marcus replicated a variety of Earth foods for her to try. This is interesting, Zara said diplomatically as she sampled a spicy curry. The explosion of flavors was almost overwhelming to her sensitive palate, but she found herself intrigued by the complexity. Marcus laughed at her expression. Too much? He asked, offering her a glass of water. Zara shook her head, taking another small bite. Different, she said, but not unpleasant. It's like your culture in edible form, intense, varied, sometimes shocking, but never boring. Their exchanges weren't limited to food and holograms. They shared music, literature, and art from their respective worlds. Zara was moved to tears by the raw emotion of a human opera, while Marcus spent hours puzzling over the intricate patterns of an Arcturian symphony, trying to decipher its mathematical harmonies. One evening, as they sat in a quiet corner of the diplomatic quarters gardens, Marcus brought up a topic they had both been avoiding. Zara, he said, his voice hesitant, I know this union was arranged for political reasons, but I've come to value our time together, our friendship. I just want you to know that whatever happens, whatever form this relationship takes, I'm committed to making it work. Zara felt a warmth spread through her, a feeling she was still learning to identify. As am I, Marcus, she replied softly. You've challenged me, opened my eyes to new possibilities. I'm grateful for that." There was a moment of tension, a sense of unspoken possibilities hanging in the air between them. Then Marcus cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "So, there's something else I wanted to discuss, a human tradition I thought we might try." He produced a small, flat device. "It's called a movie night," he explained with a grin. "I thought we could start with some classics. How do you feel about science fiction?" Zara laughed, the sound like tinkling crystals. "You mean humans imagine what alien life might be like?" "Oh yes," Marcus said, his eyes twinkling. "And let me tell you, some of our guesses were way off. But that's part of the fun." As they settled in to watch, Zara found herself acutely aware of Marcus's presence beside her. The warmth of his body, the sound of his laughter, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. All of it was becoming familiar, comforting. She was still learning to navigate the complexity of human emotions, still uncertain about the future of their union. But in that moment, watching an outlandish depiction of alien life through human eyes, Zara felt a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. There were still challenges ahead, cultural gaps to bridge and political obstacles to overcome. But as she glanced at Marcus, engrossed in explaining the movie's context, Zara felt a surge of optimism. Together, they were proving that understanding between their species was possible. And perhaps in that understanding, they were forging something even more precious, a genuine connection that transcended their differences. As the movie played on, Zara allowed herself to relax, to simply enjoy the moment. The future was uncertain, but for now, she was content to explore this new frontier of cultural exchange, one shared experience at a time. Crisis and cooperation. The blaring of alarms shattered the tranquil atmosphere of Nexus Prime, jolting Zara from her meditative state. She rushed to the communication console, her hearts racing, as she absorbed the incoming information. A spatial anomaly had appeared on the outskirts of the system, growing at an alarming rate and threatening to destabilize the delicate balance of the galactic hub. Before she could fully process the situation, her door chimed. Marcus burst in, his face etched with concern. "Zara, are you seeing this?" he asked, gesturing to the holographic display that had sprung to life in the center of the room. She nodded grimly. "It's unlike anything I've ever encountered. The energy readings are off the charts." As they watched, the anomaly pulsed, sending out a shockwave that rocked the station. Zara stumbled, caught off guard by the sudden movement. Marcus reached out instinctively, steadying her with a strong arm around her waist. For a moment, they stood frozen, acutely aware of their physical proximity. Then, as quickly as it had come, the moment passed, and they turned their attention back to the crisis at hand. "We need to get to the council chambers," Zara said, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. "They'll be calling an emergency session." The corridors of Nexus Prime were chaos as they made their way to the central hub. Representatives from dozens of species rushed about, their translators creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Fear and confusion permeated the air, palpable even to non-telepathic species. In the council chambers, High Counselor Vexera was already addressing the assembled diplomats. "And so we find ourselves facing an unprecedented threat," he was saying as Zara and Marcus entered. "Our best scientists are at a loss to explain the nature of this anomaly, let alone how to counter it." Marcus leaned in close to Zara, his breath warm against her antenna. "This is bad," he whispered. "Look at them. They're paralyzed by indecision." Zara nodded, feeling a growing sense of frustration. The Galactic Council, for all its wisdom, was often slow to act in times of crisis. Their commitment to consensus and careful deliberation, usually a strength, now threatened to doom them all. As the debate dragged on, with various factions arguing over the best course of action, Marcus grew increasingly agitated. Finally, unable to contain himself any longer, he stepped forward. "Esteemed members of the council," he said, his voice cutting through the din. "While we debate, that anomaly grows stronger. We need to act now." A ripple of murmurs swept through the chamber. Vexera's eyes narrowed. "And what would you suggest, Captain Chen?" "This is a delicate matter, not to be rushed into." "With all due respect, Counselor," Marcus interrupted, "delicacy won't save us if that thing tears the station apart. On Earth, we have a saying, 'Desperate times call for desperate measures.'" Zara felt a mixture of admiration and anxiety as she watched Marcus. His boldness in addressing the council was almost shocking by Arcturian standards, but she couldn't deny the truth of his words. "The human is right," she found herself saying, moving to stand beside Marcus. "We cannot afford to wait. I propose we form a joint task force, combining the scientific knowledge of the council races with humanity's unique problem-solving abilities." The chamber erupted into chaos once more, but Vexera held up a hand for silence. "An interesting proposal," he said, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly. "But can we trust the humans with such sensitive technology and information?" Marcus stepped forward again, his posture straight and proud. "Counselor, members of the galactic community, I understand your hesitation. Humanity is new to your coalition, and our history is not without its dark chapters. But right now, none of that matters. We're all facing the same threat. Let us prove ourselves as allies, as beings worthy of your trust." There was a moment of tense silence, broken only by the distant wail of warning sirens. Then, slowly, heads began to nod. Voices rose in agreement. Vexera looked from Marcus to Zara, then back to the assembled diplomats. "Very well," he said at last. "Ambassador Xinful, Captain Chen, you will lead this task force. You have the full resources of the Council at your disposal. Do not make us regret this decision." What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Zara and Marcus found themselves at the heart of a diverse team, bringing together the finest minds from across the galaxy. The Arcturian's natural gift for coordination complemented Marcus's decisive leadership style perfectly. As they worked, Zara couldn't help but marvel at the humans' approach to problem-solving. Where Arcturians sought harmony and balance, humans seemed to thrive on controlled chaos. They proposed wild theories, argued passionately, and pushed the boundaries of what seemed possible. "It's not about finding the perfect solution," Marcus explained when Zara questioned their methods. "It's about trying everything until something works." And work it did. As the anomaly grew to terrifying proportions, threatening to engulf the entire Nexus system, the task force made a breakthrough. By combining Arcturian crystal technology with human-designed energy dampeners, they created a device capable of stabilizing the spatial rift. The deployment was fraught with danger. Marcus insisted on leading the mission himself, piloting a small craft to the heart of the anomaly. Zara, to her own surprise, refused to let him go alone. "We started this together," she said firmly. "We'll finish it together." As their ship approached the swirling vortex of energy, Zara felt fear unlike anything she had experienced before. But mixed with that fear was an exhilarating sense of purpose. She glanced at Marcus, saw the determination in his eyes, and felt her own resolve strengthen. The next few moments were a blur of blinding light, deafening noise, and gut-wrenching motion. Zara's telepathic senses were overwhelmed by the raw energy surrounding them. She reached out instinctively, her hand finding Marcus's. His grip was strong, anchoring her in the chaos. And then, suddenly, it was over. The anomaly collapsed in on itself, leaving behind nothing but empty space and a profound silence. As they made their way back to Nexus Prime, exhausted but triumphant, Zara realized something had fundamentally changed. The crisis had forged a bond between them that went beyond diplomatic necessity or even friendship. In facing danger together, in combining their strengths and overcoming their differences, they had discovered a deep, mutual respect and trust. The reception that greeted them upon their return was jubilant. Species that had long been at odds celebrated together, united by their brush with destruction and their collective victory. In the midst of it all, Zara and Marcus stood side by side, tired but proud. "We did it," Marcus said softly, his eyes meeting hers. Zara nodded, a warm smile spreading across her face. "We did," she agreed. "Together." As the celebration continued around them, Zara found herself reflecting on how far they had come. The human she had once feared as a potential threat had become a trusted partner, someone she now couldn't imagine facing the universe without. There were still challenges ahead, cultural differences to navigate and political obstacles to overcome. But Zara knew now, with a certainty that ran bone deep, that together they could face anything the cosmos might throw at them. The future, once so uncertain, now seemed bright with possibility. A new understanding. In the weeks following the spatial anomaly crisis, Nexus Prime buzzed with a new energy. The successful collaboration between humans and the established galactic races had opened doors and minds alike. For Zara and Marcus, however, the change was far more personal. They stood together on a balcony overlooking the sprawling cityscape of the galactic capital. The twin moons hung low in the sky, bathing everything in a soft, ethereal light. Zara's scales shimmered with iridescent hues, while Marcus's eyes reflected the starlight above. "It's hard to believe how much has changed," Zara mused, her voice barely above a whisper. "When this all began, I was terrified of you, of all humans." Marcus chuckled softly, shaking his head. "And I was convinced that I'd never be able to understand your people's ways. Too rigid, too perfect." "Perfect." Zara turned to him, a questioning look in her multifaceted eyes. "Well, that's how it seemed at first," Marcus explained. "Your society, your technology, everything so carefully balanced and controlled. It was intimidating." Zara nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "Just as your chaos and unpredictability frightened me. But now we know better," Marcus finished for her, a warm smile spreading across his face. They lapsed into a comfortable silence, both lost in thought. The past months had been a whirlwind of discovery, challenges, and growth. What had started as a reluctant diplomatic arrangement had blossomed into something neither of them had anticipated. "You know," Marcus said after a while, "there's an old Earth saying, 'The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.' I never fully understood it until now." Zara tilted her head, curious. "How do you mean?" Marcus turned to face her fully, his expression earnest. "Look at what we've accomplished together. Not just you and me, but humans and Arcturians, all the races of the galaxy. Separately, we each have our strengths and weaknesses. But together, we're capable of so much more." Zara felt a warmth spread through her at his words. It was true. The crisis had proved that their differences, once seen as insurmountable obstacles, could be their greatest asset when united towards a common goal. "I've been thinking," she said, her antenna twitching slightly in what Marcus now recognized as a sign of excitement. "Perhaps we could formalize this cooperation. A new initiative, focused on fostering understanding and collaboration between all our peoples." Marcus's eyes lit up. "An interspecies cultural exchange program. Zara, that's brilliant." They spent the next few hours outlining their idea, their excitement growing with each new possibility they explored. Scientists from different worlds working side by side, artists collaborating on pieces that bridged the gap between their unique perceptions, diplomats living among other species to truly understand their ways. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, casting the city in a warm glow, Zara and Marcus finally paused, realizing how much time had passed. "We should probably get some rest," Marcus said, stifling a yawn. "Big day ahead, presenting this to the council." Zara nodded, but made no move to leave. Instead, she turned to Marcus, her expression suddenly serious. "Before we go, there's something I need to say." Marcus straightened, giving her his full attention. "What is it?" Zara took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "When this arrangement was first proposed, I saw it as a duty, a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. I never imagined, I never allowed myself to hope." She trailed off, struggling to find the right words. Marcus waited patiently, his presence a comforting constant. "What I'm trying to say," Zara continued finally, "is that you've changed me, Marcus. You've shown me that there's beauty in unpredictability, strength in emotion. You've taught me to question, to wonder, to dream beyond the boundaries I once thought immutable." Marcus reached out, gently taking her hand in his. The gesture, once so alien, now felt as natural as breathing. "You've changed me too, Zara," he said softly. "Your wisdom, your perspective, it's made me a better person, a better representative of humanity. You've taught me the value of reflection, of seeking harmony not just within ourselves, but with the universe around us." Their eyes met, and in that moment, all the remaining barriers between them seemed to dissolve. They were no longer just an Arcturian and a human, no longer merely representatives of their respective species. They were two beings who had found in each other a connection that transcended the boundaries of biology and culture. "So," Marcus said, a hint of his characteristic humor returning to his voice, "I guess this means our arranged union wasn't such a bad idea after all." Zara laughed, the sound like music in the early morning air. "I suppose not," she agreed, "though I doubt even the wisest members of the council could have predicted this outcome." As they made their way back inside, ready to face the new day and the challenges it would bring, both Zara and Marcus felt a profound sense of hope. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with potential obstacles and misunderstandings, but they would face it together, armed with a deeper understanding of each other and a shared vision for the future. Their union, once a source of fear and apprehension, had become a symbol of what was possible when different cultures came together with open minds and open hearts. As they prepared to share their ideas with the council, Zara and Marcus knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and together they were ready to explore it all.